sound off. Hey, welcome to the Death of a Dream podcast. This was like a quick reverse. I have to say, it took me a while to even get this episode going because I was all up in my head. Now, how we start every day, right? In that mantra of me being given the words that find the ears ready to receive, I was feeling so lost in my message, lost in what I would bring to this space, lost in if this is even space meant for me. Like, what am I even doing here anymore? Why do I still feel drawn and called to do this work? There really is no proof of success. If anything, you're getting the exact opposite. So are those signs, and what is going on? Why are you here, right? And so many times that's how our voice creeps in, no question. Like, even if you feel like you've rescued yourself from this space and you've done better, it still comes back. It still comes and finds you in some way. And so today it was about the ask, and probably about, as I'm starting to get lives ready, as I'm starting to get cameras ready, I am just handed the words, the topic, the subject matter, and that doesn't happen unless you establish, right, that intent, that mantra, what you are trying to accomplish here. And no matter what, right, because success really isn't a measure, no matter what, your movement forward with an intention that's beautiful and about love and acceptance, you're always going to find a path forward. But you have to do the work to establish what it is that you're trying to do here, right? And my intention is to bring words to you, given to me, to you when you're ready. Period. And that's why a lot of this work lacks CTAs. That's why a lot of this work lacks blatant call outs of look at me, look at me, look at me. That's intentional. I don't want people who aren't ready. I don't want people who feel like they just want to do this because it's trending. Like, this is meant for people who are ready to go on a journey, who are ready to start questioning things, who are ready to start showing up, ready to start changing, and maybe not even fully changing, but to start questioning some of the things that aren't serving you anymore. And you have to be in a very aware and ready mental state to challenge those things. And so this isn't really meant for everybody. This isn't really a call to arms for the entirety of the world, because that isn't my intention, right? My intention is the people who are ready to receive it. And that could be one person, that could be no people, because maybe they're not ready until 10 years from now. Maybe they're not ready until 100 years from now. Right? Maybe I won't even exist when they're ready for it. But either way, it will find people who are ready, period. And so, my great thing is just always the shock and awe of people who do listen to this, people who are ready, right? And not even ready to go, oh, Hanna, I'm on board. All the things you're doing, I'm so here. Let's go, right? But people who are what I just talked about, right? They're just ready to question it. Not that everybody's going to just follow tooth and nail and do all the things, but they are going to show up for themselves. They are going to show up for the fact that maybe they haven't lived according to themselves. Maybe they haven't done things the way that they wanted to. And gosh, yesterday I got a message from a very long time listener. Heyo. And she had made this establishment that like she has a great thing that will just like trump all great things. And that's inevitably the goal of this work, right? Find people who are ready, find people who want more, who maybe saw themselves in a lower light or a lower frequency than what they knew they were capable of, and they demanded and sought out and found more, and you never know what that timeline's going to look like, right? Like you don't just show up and you're like, okay, I got it, Hannah. The death of my dream, that really wasn't the death. That really maybe was the beginning or the rebirth. And like now that I show up and I renounce it and I talk through all the things that were holding me back, like now we're ready. You really never, ever, ever know what that moment is going to look like for you or what that timeline is going to look like for you. You always think that you know. Trust me, like a couple of months ago was the absolute going to do it all for me moment for me. And here we are, right? Like you never really arrive. And I think that's really challenging because it always seems like you do. And I will tell you from personal experience that the very thought and idea that you will have arrived when you accomplish said physical thing or physical manifestation of whatever that is really untrue. It just isn't real. And even when you do, right? When you do get there, all of a sudden there's this moment where you realize you still exist after that point. And now what? Right? Like literally kind of where we picked up this podcast. Now what? And I think you have to renounce and let go of that idea that you ever have arrived, period. And, this listener, like, I don't know. What do you want to do? What do you want to accomplish? And her and I have those conversations a lot. And, for any of you who are wondering, oh, I don't know, I have these crazy ideas, blah, 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 like throw them at me. I am here, and a wall of beautiful energy sent back into the wavelength of whatever it is you want to accomplish. And so reach out by all means. There are no limits. That goes on forever. So I'm here for you and all the big things that you have going on. Like I show up every day in hopes that maybe you aren't here yet, but eventually you'll get here. And this will just help you in some way, shape, or form. I'm not sure how. I know it probably isn't going to help you every day, but maybe just the consistency of being helps you to keep going. Right? And so for this listener, it's just kind of for me, that will forever be my greatest thing, and I started this with that intention, but I'll say on the back end, right? The real goal was that I rise up because other people rose up because of me. And I think as you continue to do this work, you realize you have so very little to do with it, right? Because I'm just sitting here in a room, pressing a button, bringing a message. You are the one who has to keep showing back up. You are the one who has to put wheels in motion. You are the one who has to put the car in drive. And this is such a small, significant but insignificant part of your power and ability to show up for yourself. And so every time that I hear from a listener that they have changed and transformed, it just gives me, or that they have a great thing, it just gives me hope that this this deserves to exist for a reason. And so that is my great thing. Having people who keep showing up, who keep like whispers in my ears that it is helping in some way, shape, or form, however that looks for you, however it happens for you, right? Like maybe you just started doing the great thing and you listen to one episode and here we are. And just that started to shift things for you. I don't know. I don't know what it looks like, but I can tell you that my greatest thing will always be you. Okay. Take time for yourself. Recognize yourself for your great thing. I don't know what's going on, but I know there's greatness there somewhere. Even if it's hard to find on some days, there are things. You are great, like beyond. I can't even imagine how amazing you are. I can't. I don't even want to try. Because the few people that I speak to, I know are doing amazing things. And even if we don't term it amazing, aligned things, most importantly. Like they are setting a trajectory where they are the most important factor, where their decisions, their terms for their life are theirs, period. And I don't know. I think a lot of us get lost in what it's supposed to look like versus what we want it to look like. And that can be a hard thing to call yourself back to. So let's go. Okay. So I know today has just been odd. And really, there have been just really weird energies. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's whole new moons. And so like it happens. It does. But today I'm just like, what is it? Like, what are we all doing here? How do we find our way? Why isn't there one way to win? And that kind of brought me to this idea of this topic, and it came to me about 5 seconds before we went on air. That's wonderful. I think life really is about the experiment of it all. And I'm in a lot of creative groups because like I could go and just sit in a library and be impacted by the energy of creative works. And literature is one of my favorite expressions of creativity, period. Like people putting ideas together with words, here for it. Speaking is also one of my favorite mediums of creativity. And for me, I think all of us, and if you haven't watched the Disney movie Soul, now, yes, there are a lot of different comments floating around about that, but I think if you really watch it with the core intent of this realization that there isn't any one thing, and that's a hard pill for me to swallow, because I really thought, oh no, it's podcasting, it's speaking, it's all of these things. And I think we all have to start to shift to this understanding that, one, we're not in control. I already said that. Yikes, that's a really hard one. That's a big, huge concept to grasp and think through. But two, that any one thing is always going to come to an end. And when we lose our identity in that, whatever that is, and a lot of times it looks like, right, running with blinders on towards whatever we think it is, and not really taking time to be in the present moment to look at anything else as an option, right? And so if we start to remove those blinders and we start to remove those limits, so even if you're a creative, right, and you have a wider kind of toolbox of things that you can put into this world, start pressing that a little bit. Like, I know that you have your favorite outlet, right? My favorite outlet is speaking, period. But what if we start experimenting with other outlets? What if we start to push that a little bit and look outside of ourselves and our own agendas of what we think it is. Maybe that's the fun of life. Maybe reinventing ourselves, refining ourselves after things is the beauty of the journey, right? And you have to establish yourself in the present moment to look at your ability to do that. Now, your ability to look forward and think about where you want to be in 10 years is obviously a huge, huge benefit, right? Having that bigger picture knowledge and vision for where you're headed. But this idea that you're in the present moment acting as you see fit or as you want, right? And I think we can look at it this way. It's really easy to lose ourselves in very strict identities, period. And those things that we tie ourselves to, right? Tirelessly, no question. I just want to tie myself to being a speaker. Okay, that's it. That's what I want to tie myself to. It's my favorite mode of creativity. That's what I want to do. Well, think of how exhausting that agenda gets very quickly if we don't experience success. When we limit it to one thing and we don't look at other options and we don't experiment with what that could look like, right? Even just to walk this earth as we are and look at ourselves as more than just that one thing. And this is where the blinders come in. I'm only a speaker. I denounce all other things. Speaking is the only thing that's going to be for me. I can't and won't see other things. When I speak, I am blindly speaking. I am really not even thinking about subject matter. I am getting so amped up about it because I am so passionate about this medium and this is the only thing that I want to do. And I completely forget that anyone else is in existence in that moment. Right? And you see this shown in Soul. And that's right. That's called the vibe or the flow state. And when you do that, you do lift and exist in another place. You are in a flow. People can probably see that. Not that you can see them because you are just like in your zone. And that's such a beautiful thing to experience, whatever that looks like for you. But you start to put on blinders. You start to get that high of what that feels like, and you want that more. That's a normal human being thing, no question. And the more that you get to experience that, and the quicker you get to experience that, right? So if you just get into something and then people are like, whoa, you're good at this, the addiction to winning and the flow starts to re-represent itself as kind of ego almost. And then you start chasing that, right? And you start chasing the praise and you start chasing X, Y, and Z, but mostly you're chasing this idea of what people believe you are. And so that's why it's important to continue experimenting with it, because it really allows us to break down those blinders and allows us to explore different mediums. Even if you're not a creative, what does that look like? You can be your job and the best at your job, and that's amazing. But like, what else are you doing to exist in this world? What else do you do? How else do you give back and create some sense of worth outside of your workplace? Because if there really isn't anything there other than that to exist, think of how low you're going to feel, right? And even if you limit that to two things, think of how low you're going to feel when one of those goes away, because eventually it will go away. Right? Maybe you lose your job. Maybe you never lose your job, but hey, guess what? Eventually you have to retire or die. Like, eventually, or eventually you get sick, and then like that sickness just spirals you into this super depressive state where you can't even be rescued if you wanted to be, because your only worth is tied to your work, and no one really knows you exist unless you're physically in the building. And so then your self-worth goes down, and all of a sudden you don't exist, and then you go back to work, and then all of a sudden you aren't as good at your job and you aren't getting the praise, and then it starts to just spiral out of control, and you slowly lose your mind and spiral into a place that you never thought that you would be. And I'm not speaking to that from personal experience, except for I completely am, because that was me. And still at times is me, right? Like I bounce around into blinding states often. It's really hard not to, and it's even harder when you challenge yourself in ways you haven't been challenged before, and you remove all outs of winning, right? Like, oh my gosh. I don't, honestly, like, I've been taking the high road and like just believing, right? Like, credence is my word. I am so here for that. I am so mentally accepting, but like, it's not easy to just keep losing. And it really isn't easy to strip back your identity and then rebuild it yourself and not have that reliant on normal forms of identity justification or identity acceptance, right? And so like it isn't as easy as me popping up and being excited on a microphone every morning. There are lows, and you definitely have heard those, hopefully the last 6 months. And yes, I still pop up on a microphone every morning, but that's just out of pure commitment to service of who I hope will be impacted by this someday. Do I know that someone will? No, but I think that's the beauty of art. Like, it's so subjective and not always adapted by the masses like some of us would envision, right? Like, and I don't know. I want to continue pushing all of you to find your identity outside of the normal instances, right? Like, it's about more. It's about bigger, and it's about continuing to experiment and find yourself. Because the second that you think that you have it nailed down, you probably, I don't know, are about to lose that, or it's about to change just to keep pushing you and challenging you. And so I really think that that's what life is about. Not getting so caught up and so tunnel vision and blinders into any one thing. Continuing to stay open to experimenting. Continuing to stay open to finding and not perfecting, right? Like, you don't ever have to be good at playing the guitar. Maybe you just enjoy playing it and hearing music and making music. That's a crazy concept, isn't it? Have you ever thought about the things that you just do for the pure joy of doing? And I'm trying to even break myself of this in not creating my own tunnels of creativity and only identifying with the ones that are openly appreciated and deemed successful, right? Like, continuing to experiment and express. And we talked about that last week, right? The importance of the expression of that emotion, whether you do that in a physical word representation right? You have the ability, the outlet to speak your own truth, to speak your own reality as you see it. And when you have that, that is an expression, right? And it channels in a different way. You start to shift what that energy exchange looks like. And so whatever that looks like for you, whether you're creative and that's a very, expansive list of things, whether you are just loving and light giving to this world, that could look like an equally expansive list of things. Maybe you're gifted with word and comfort and love, and that's your job, just to love on all the people around you and support them. Maybe, you're gifted with being able to just do things like no one else. Everyone else seems to have this guard up about who they are and what they're about. I'm one of them. But you have this beautiful and innate ability to just kind of be and mold and flow. Like, imagine what that could do for people who are very tied up and strung up in that. Like, what if you can be someone who just goes along with them and lets them win? And like, that's such a beautiful and important role to play. Like, do not forget about the importance of that. But I think at the end of the day, we all bring beautiful, beautiful gifts and light into this world, period. And whether you're in a winning season or a losing season, and I'm speaking pretty much specifically to myself, your job isn't to win or lose. That really isn't up to you, to me, to anyone, right? And even establishing that there would be a win or loss scenario is almost a silly way to complicate it. What if we just allow ourselves to flow freely in and out of success, freely in and out of identities, and we don't get so complicated with it? Like, what if we aspire to presence? We aspire to create. We aspire to exist. And we stop overcomplicating it by giving it any one establishment, right? Because with that establishment and that claim, and I'm saying, like, write your goals down, manifest, do that. Just don't get so caught up and tied to it being only that one thing, because it may need to change. And if that's the only thing that you've identified with and worked on, you're going to feel super low when it all comes crashing down. And I can tell you that definitely was my experience when I had my blinders on and it was only allowed to be volleyball and it was only allowed to be that one goal. And it hurts. And I will say, recovering from the trauma of that moment took years upon years, potentially even a decade, right? And that the dealing with that, I think, would have been so much easier if I hadn't put blinders on. And the only reason that I put blinders on is because it's natural, right? I was told I was good at something and I latched onto that and I ran as fast as I could towards that because it felt good to finally be good at something. And now, in this season of loss for myself, it would be amazing to just be good at something again, right? But I have to protect myself from my own ego, because I know if I get that gold star, if I get that 5-star rating, I know that I'll start to put those blinders on again and I'll start to chase those egos. And so for me, it's just about continuing to test and experiment with what success feels like for me. What does it look like for me personally, as I experiment and create in this world? Creating is just something I love And so let's start to expand what that looks like. Let's start to play with different forms of mediums of expression. As always, you're smart, you're strong, you're beautiful. What are you going to do? Change the world.